Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. So today, as we know, Donald Trump won the presidential election a few days ago on Tuesday going into Wednesday morning. So I thought it'd be fun to take a look back at the polling in a lot of the key swing states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, and just see what pollsters were close to getting the election correct and what pollsters were off. And maybe that could be a sign of which pollsters that could be more trustworthy going forward in future elections. So I'm going to go to the RCP map. This is of course, the electoral map I used several times going into the 2024 election. And we're just going to look at some of the toss-up states and show what they looked like. So I'm going to start with the state of Minnesota right here, and it's 10 electoral votes. Minnesota ended up being a win of about 4.2%. The RCP average was +4 for Harris, so this is very, very close to being correct. Atlas Intel Rasmussen was Harris +2, Harris +3. Minnesota Post was Harris +3. So, and Survey USA was Harris +8. So no one got the 4-point margin, but they were around the right number at Harris +3, Harris +2, and the average of Minnesota was pretty much on point. Looking at the state of Wisconsin and its 10 electoral votes, in this one, Donald Trump ended up winning by 0.8. The RCP average was Harris +4, so the average was off by about 1.2%. It did not get the winner right. It got the winner wrong. But the margin of difference between them was actually not that drastic. 1.2% difference is really not a massive difference, but it still did get the candidate wrong. But let's look at the polls here who were the most close and most accurate in this. The first one has to be Atlas Intel. This had Trump +1. Trump won Wisconsin by 0.8% so far. If there are any more votes, they could change it. But Trump +1, that is exactly on the money from what the end result ended up being. Trafalgar had Harris +1, so this was off again by about 1.2 to 1.8, depending on how you look at it. But again, this is very, very close, and in the realm of polling and elections, this really isn't that far off of a difference. Insider advantage, 1 point for Trump. Again, nailed it exactly what the margin was. The Hill Emerson, a tie, only off by 0.8%. Again, very, very close. That was very good. New York Times Siena, Harris +2. This was off by about 2.8% at the lowest, so not great, not as bad as some other polls like the CNN poll, but certainly not the best. America Greatness is off by 0.8, not bad. Mayor's off by 2, again, not great, not terrible, but not great. Rasmussen, Trump +3, again, that was off a little bit too Republican in Trump's direction, but not great, but again, not a huge difference, but the +1s are certainly closer to what the margin ended up being. The worst one, and I'm actually, from a personal bias standpoint, I'm very glad this happened, was when the CNN poll came out showing Harris +6 in Wisconsin. I immediately pointed this poll out as an outlier at the time, and I said, had this poll not been in the survey, it is very likely Donald Trump would have been ahead in the RCP average. And I could tell immediately the 51 for Harris, 45 for Trump was such an outlier compared to every other poll that's been done. And it's not even Harris getting 51 that I disagreed with so much. It was that there was a 6-point margin of a lead over Donald Trump at 45 when every other poll had Trump at a minimum at 47 to 48. So I could just tell immediately that was an outlier. And this one being off by about 7 points is honestly very, very good. USA Today in Suffolk had Trump +1, so that was very accurate in the state of Wisconsin. Marquette had Harris +1, so again, even though it did pick the winner incorrectly, the margins in which it did so were not off by that much. So Wisconsin, Atlas Intel, Trafalgar, Insider Advantage, USA Today, Suffolk, and Marquette certainly seem to be the ones that were very close, as well as the Hill Emerson, American Greatness, Echelon Heights, and surprisingly, the final poll Morning Consult. Now looking at the state of Michigan, this is one where Harris led in the average by 0.5, the end result being Trump +1.4. And again, we're going to see that Atlas Intel and Trafalgar Group, as much as they're stereotyped as Republican-leaning polls or Republican-leaning pollsters, they were the most accurate in this. And Atlas Intel had Trump +2, Trafalgar had Trump +1. 1.4 kind of splits the difference between the two, but both of these were very close and very close to being accurate. Next is Insider Advantage, which had the race at a tie, which again, based on the polling done, that would be also one of the more reliable polls. It was off by 1.4, but again, 1.4 isn't that bad, whereas you have the Hill Emerson, which Again, +2 for Harris, so that was off by about 3.4%. That is not great. It's not abysmal, but it's getting towards the not great realm. New York Times Siena was tied, so that's a pretty good result. Mitchell Research, +2 for Harris. Rasmussen, +1 for Harris, so not as bad, getting a little better. Maris, Harris, +3, that was off by 4.4%. That's not good. Echelon, a tie. Washington Post, +1. Fox News, tie. And USA Today, Suffolk, where it was also tied. So a lot of the polls did show a tied race. Every poll that had Harris +2 or more, I would say is probably not that great in terms of what to look for, which is interesting because the Hill Emerson, I usually do have a pretty good track record with seeing how they do. But in Michigan, it could have been a little bit of a hidden Trump polling bump, which I know a lot of pollsters, and especially the media pollsters, did not think that Trump would have one as much. I was pretty adamant there would be a hidden Trump bump, and it seemed there was a slight one again, where Atlas, Intel, and Trafalgar was able to accurately predict that, where some of the other pollsters were not. So that's Michigan. So far, Atlas, Insider Advantage, and Trafalgar certainly seem to be the more reputable of the pollsters in the 3 states we've gone over so far. Looking at the state of Pennsylvania, this is one where Trump led in the RCP average by 0.4%. The end result ended up being 2.1. So again, a pretty accurate depiction of what Kamala Harris got, but a underestimation of what Donald Trump got, underestimating Trump's support by about 2%. So Trump got 2.1%. Atlas, Intel had Trump +1. The Hill Emerson had Trump +1. New York Times had it at a tie. Trafalgar, Insider Advantage both had Trump +1. This is one where a lot of these polls honestly did do pretty well. I mean, +1 to tie. I mean, yes, it ended up being 2.1, so it's not exact, but it's really not that far off. Even Muhlenberg College had Harris +2. That would be off by about 4 points. That you could say is far off. USA Today at a tie, -2 is not really that far off. It's not great, but not too far. Maris was off by 4. Echelon was off by 4. Washington Post was off by 3. Data for Progress, Democratic Line poll, was off by 4. Rasmussen reports had Trump +2, so Rasmussen actually predicted Pennsylvania on the dot pretty accurately in Pennsylvania. Morning Consult had it as a tie, so -2. Fox News had Trump +1, so that was off by 1. Still very, very good. Quinnipiac, surprisingly, 49-47, Trump +2. Quinnipiac nailed Pennsylvania as well, so that was very interesting. And then CNN, CBS, American Greatness, and Susquehanna all had it as a tie. So it was a very, very interesting one in Pennsylvania where, yes, the polls did underestimate Trump, but they did accurately get what Harris was going to get, only off by 0.3. So Pennsylvania is a very interesting one. Again, it looks like Atlas, Intel, Trafalgar, Insider Advantage, and you can make a case for the Hill Emerson and New York Times Siena in this state being pretty close to the end margin. Quinnipiac, though, certainly was good, as well as Rasmussen and Fox News as well. That was Pennsylvania. Now we're going to go, before we go to North Carolina, we're going to look at the state of New Hampshire. This is one where, it was really a surprise how close this ended up being on election night. There were some whispers that would get potentially close. I said more of, I'll believe it when I see it, and, well, I saw it. It ended up being Harris +2.8. Very, very close. That would be a lean Democratic win. The margin in the RCP average was 4.2, and the closest would be Harris +3 to the average, which Emerson, which WHTH and TV, did have Harris +3 at 50-47. Now, if you round up, it would be 51-48 would be most likely, so the numbers were off by about 1 point for each candidate, but the margin of victory for Emerson was correct. UNH had Harris +5, St. Anselm had Harris +5, Rasmussen had Harris +1, and UMass Lowell had Harris +3. So you can make the argument these polls are off by about 2 points. Rasmussen was off by about 2 points, and UMass Lowell overestimated Harris by about 4 points. But Emerson really was pretty much right on the money for New Hampshire for Trump versus Harris in 2024. And briefly, I'm actually just going to take a little bit of a look at Virginia just to see what it ended up being. It ended up being the RCP average was Harris +5. The polling ended up being, and the actual result was Harris +5.1. So the polling got Virginia incredibly accurate, especially from Atlas Intel. Again, 51-46. I mean, you can't get any more accurate than this. Harris +5. That was spot on the money. Washington Post also had Harris +6. The numbers are off, but the margin was also very, very close. Senegal was off by 2, and Rasmussen was off by about 3, but Atlas and Washington Post certainly did very well with Virginia. And just while we're here, I'm just going to check New Jersey really quick because I am curious. Yeah, I didn't think there'd be any polls close to that, but that was a very interesting case that happened there. North Carolina, this is one where, from the really beginning, I always said there seems to be a Republican RCP average increase from what the actual result ends up being. This happened in 2020 and 2016. The poll showed North Carolina being a 1.2% lead for Trump. Trump ended up winning by 3.3. There always seems to be a hidden Trump surge on election day in North Carolina. And the polls in this one, Atlas Intel had Trump +2, Insider Trump +2, The Hill Emerson Trump +1, New York Times Siena Trump +2, that one's off by about 5 points. East Carolina Trump +2, Rasmussen Trump +3, Morning Consult Trump +2, Trafalgar Trump +3, Fox News Trump +1, CNN Harris +1. These really weren't all that off, aside New York Times off by about 5, CNN off by about 4. You could say those ones really weren't good, but Atlas being off by 1, as well as Insider Advantage, New York Times being off by 2, East Carolina off by 1, Rasmussen spot on the money, Morning Consult off by 1, Trafalgar spot on the money, Fox News off by 2. North Carolina's polling is actually a little bit more accurate compared to some other states, but off by about 1 or 2 points or so, and Trump benefited from the extra percentage. But again, I'm not too surprised. I think we're going to continue to see this for a while of the polls underestimating Republicans by a little bit, by 1 to 2 points, but not really a massive difference in North Carolina. Again, Atlas, Insider Advantage, Trafalgar still seem to be the 3 polls that are doing very well right now. Honorable mention to Rasmussen, who has 2 swing states now where it's looked pretty well. Georgia, this is one where the RCP average had Trump up by 1.3, the end result being 2.2, a margin of 0.9% difference. And once again, the usual suspects are here. Atlas Intel had Trump +2, ended up being 2.2. Again, you can't get any closer than that. Atlas was very accurate there. Insider Advantage was off by about 1 point. Again, that's actually very, very good for polling. The Hill Emerson was off by 1 point. New York Times Siena was off by 3. East Carolina was off by 1. Data for Progress, Democratic poll, not surprising, off by 3. Rasmussen, Trump +5 was off by 3. CNN was off by 1. Trafalgar, spot on. And Morning Consult, spot on. It's interesting because as much as Morning Consult does have, according to 538, a Democratic skew, the final polls it had were actually pretty decent, so that's very interesting. But again, Atlas Intel, Insider Advantage, Emerson certainly did very well here, as did Trafalgar and Morning Consult, which rare Morning Consult W, but that's very interesting. Definitely New York Times and Data for Progress definitely had a rough go of it for Georgia. Now we're going to look at Arizona. Now, of course, on the New York Times map, Arizona and Nevada are not yet called, so these are subject to change, but right now the current results have Trump leading by 6.1% over Harris. The RCP average was 2.8 for Trump. Atlas Intel appears to be the closest one right now, where they had Trump, +5. Current result is +6.1, only off by 1 point, and again, that's subject to change. Atlas Intel looking very good here. Trafalgar had Trump +2, Insider Trump +3, The Hill Emerson Trump +2, New York Times Trump +4, Noble Predictive Insights Trump +1, Data for Progress Trump +1, Rasmussen Trump +2, Data Orbital Trump +8. This is a fascinating one where, again, the polls did a very good job at predicting what Kamala Harris is going to get at 46.5, but every time Trump is on the ballot, the polls seem to miss the average of what Trump's number ends up being. Trump going up about 3.5% from what the average ended up being. Atlas at Trump +5 seems to be the closest one to getting this correct. Not too far behind is Trafalgar, Insider, and The Hill Emerson did very well. New York Times Siena Trump +4, they actually did much better in Arizona than some of the other swing states. So that's Arizona for right now. Nevada, right now, Trump is leading by 3.4. I think there are a few more votes, not many, but a little bit of vote left from Clark County and from Washoe County, so this may change a bit. But right now, the RCP average was 0.6. Trump's final result is 3.4. Atlas Intel had Trump leading by 3. Another case of Atlas Intel looking like the most reliable pollster in the 2024 elections, getting pretty much every single swing state in the margin of victory correct. Very, very impressive from Atlas Intel. The Hill Emerson had it as a tie. That would be Trump was +3 of that. New York Times, frankly, was way off on this. The New York Times is off by about 6%. Noble Predictive Insights is off by about 4%. Susquehanna was off by about 3%. Rasmussen was off by about 1%, so Rasmussen did very well in Nevada as well. Data for Progress off by 5%. Trafalgar was off about 3%. Not great, not terrible for Nevada. CNN, Trump plus 1, off about 2%. Not the worst CNN's did. And Insider Advantage had it as a tie, where right now, again, 3 points. Not bad, not awful. We're going to have to wait and see how Nevada ends up finishing. But again, it seems like the streak of Atlas Intel being the most accurate pollster for 2024 certainly showed that. So it is very, very impressive overall, just looking at the map, that a lot of the more media establishment polls, CNN and, NBC, ABC, these polls had a lot more of a harder time at getting the accurate result, whereas polls like Atlas Intel, Trafalgar, and Inside really did a better job at accurately getting the final margin results. Like in Wisconsin, Atlas Intel, Trafalgar, Insider Advantage. The Hill Emerson, I think, actually did have some sneaky good polls in a lot of these states. So they definitely did a good job. But New York Times was off in some polls. Marist was as well. Morning Consult was actually off by less than I thought they would be, but CNN certainly had a rough go of it. Marquette and USA Today also weren't terrible. But I think Atlas Intel, Trafalgar, and Insider Advantage has to be seen as the big winners walking away from this election, with Rasmussen and the Hill Emerson being like honorable mentions as polls that in some places did perfect. Some places were off by a few points, but they also did pretty well. But certainly Atlas Intel, Insider, and Trafalgar are 3 polls I think did very well, and maybe bucking that a lot of pollsters have them as Republican skewed or Republican biased polls. I mean, call them whatever you want, but they did a very good job at predicting how this election was going to go. So that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to give this video a like, click subscribe, share with your friends and family, and I hope to see you in a future video. That will do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to give it a like. And if you really liked it, please remember to click the subscribe button and make sure you turn post notifications on so you always get notified when I post a new video. That way you never miss one. Also, please remember to share this video with your friends and family if you really, really, really like the video. And remember to stay tuned because I'll be posting at least one video every single day leading up until Election Day. So I'd really appreciate it if you keep coming back and watching those videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video.